Good morning. Blessing of the Lord be upon you.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
We are studying again the minor prophets. And believe it or not, we're moving along pretty well in our study. This will be the last lesson in Habakkuk, lesson 65 overall. And I think Habakkuk has been, maybe it's a very short book, but very encouraging book, because you have a prophet who understands the time that he's living in. He sees the evil that is around him, not just the evil of the nations around him, but the evil of his own nation because of the leaders that are there. But he knows that the only path back is the Lord. And he begins by complaining to the Lord. How can you allow all this evil to come upon us? And he's talking about Judah and Jerusalem and the people that are supposed to be God's chosen people. And the answer, of course, is, well, I'm going to take care of the problem. I'm going to send the Chaldeans to destroy the nation. Well, how can you do that? How can you send a nation more evil than Judah and Jerusalem to destroy it? Destroy your chosen people, your nation, and the city that you've chosen, and the place where your temple is. How can you do that? And, it just doesn't seem like there's any justice in that, but the Lord's answer is, yes, there's justice in that, because justice is not totally wrapped up in the things in this world. This world is going to have injustice in it. There's going to be cruelty, there's going to be evil, there's going to be sin. It's not going to be a perfect world. It was a perfect world at one time until sin entered in. The Lord's going to take care of the problem. Excuse me. Okay? He's going to do that, number one, by the Chaldeans coming in, taking care of the immediate evil. But secondly, what? The just shall live by faith. The righteous people, they're going to live by faith. If they trust in the Lord, it's going to be all right. Whether they live physically or die physically here on this earth, everything's going to be all right, because the purpose of man is not wrapped up totally in this earth. There's something more for man. So the best thing that they could do is be righteous. And by being righteous, whether they live or die physically, everything's going to be all right, because the Lord's going to take care of that problem. So we've kind of looked at that. Now we come down to the close, and the English Standard Version that I use has, this is Habakkuk's prayer, but it's broken down into two parts, all right? The prayer and then a song or a psalm at the end. So verses 1 through 19, that's the whole chapter. Habakkuk, remember, it's a vision, and he's told to write that vision down, make it plain so everybody who reads it can understand it. And I hope we've got an understanding of it. What's going to be his response to what the Lord has said? Well, it's a prayer and a song. And the first 16 verses are this prayer of Habakkuk the prophet. And it says, according to Shigionoth. And I hope I pronounced that right. In other words, it's a rambling poem. It's just here and there and everywhere. It's just going on. And you could probably understand that. Somebody who's in distress, it's not necessarily going to be concise and just boom, 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 moving, and it's just here and there and kind of everywhere. Kind of like, in poetic terms, the sea. And you can imagine the sea, how that it is moving up and down, and the waves and the storms on the sea. It's just kind of everywhere. You kind of get that impression from this poem that Habakkuk is giving, writing in this. And what he says is, starting with verse 2, "O Lord, I have heard the report of you." In other words, this is what the vision and the answer back that he gets from the Lord. "I've heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear." I fear this. I fear what's coming upon Judah and Jerusalem. If I have to live through this period of time, I fear. And that's a natural response, isn't it? If war's coming, we fear. That's natural, because you don't know what it's going to bring. You don't know what pain it's going to bring. You don't know what heartaches it's going to bring. But look how he kind of takes this then in stride. "In the midst of years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy." In the midst of the years. So what's in the midst of the years? Well, what did God do in the beginning? Get back down to where I'm supposed to be here. What did God do in the beginning? He created the heavens and the earth. What did he create them out of? Nothing. Well, that's an awesome thing, isn't it? And that should bring a fear of the Lord, right? Because he's able to do something like that. There's nothing else, no one else that can do something like that. Now, you talk about what happens later. What's going to happen later with that universe? It's going to be destroyed, totally. The book of 2 Peter talks about how all those elements are going to be dissolved. It's gone. Well, between the creation and the destruction of this universe, does God have to do something? Does the Lord have to do something? Sure does, doesn't it? Why? Because we keep messing it up. We keep we keep messing it up. So think about all that. We'll hit some stuff here in a moment. But historically, the Lord has acted with two elements: wrath and mercy. Right? He's let his wrath be made known, but also mercy. Mercy toward us. Because there is a need for the Lord to intervene between creation and the destruction, the end, the destruction of the universe. Look at verses 3 and 4. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. His brightness was like the light rays, rays flashed from his hand, and there he veiled his power. The song that was very popular a few years ago, thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fists. Our God is an awesome God, right? Thunder in his footsteps when he walks on the earth. Thunder. When he's striking something, lightning, you know. But it gives you that idea, and that's what is, you know, in poetic form here. It's talking about that creation, how awesome it was, and what he was doing, and just the power of the Lord. The glory of the Lord is manifest, or made known, shown, demonstrated, made obvious, however you want to define manifest, in his creation. And that's what the Apostle Paul tells us, what, in Romans chapter 2? Right? When he's talking about how that the people, they didn't want to have God in their mind. They didn't want to think about God. What they do, they created their own gods and such. But talking about creation and all, it's obvious. It's obvious that there's God. Just look at yourself. It's obvious that you have a creator. The human body and parts of the human body could not come about by evolution. Okay? There had to be a creator. There had to be one who designed everything and then brought it together. Nothing comes from nothing. And we know scientifically that this universe is not eternal, right? It had to have a beginning. It had to come from somewhere. So you have all those things. The glory of the Lord is manifest in his creation. Now in verses 5 through 10, the Lord uses the forces of nature to punish mankind. All right? The storms that we had, were those for punishment for us? Maybe. How do you know they weren't? How do you know when a hurricane hits it? Now, again, we've talked about hurricanes before. That's like a giant, flush, clean out the Everglades, get rid of the old dead stuff out of there. If we didn't have thunderstorms here, we'd hardly have any rain in our area.
We don't need the tornadoes and stuff like what they did damage to Paris. I don't think that was for punishment. It just happened. It's nature.
But again, what does it teach us?
Be prepared.
There's something greater than us. If we just want to stop at nature, that's fine. But there's something greater than nature. He who created nature. It makes us look beyond. And what happened at Perryton, what happened at Matador, that's a terrible thing. But what has that done for a lot of people?
Brought them closer to God.
Brought them closer to God. Yeah, and it showed, even on the basest level, more humanity of human beings. Because there's so much given to help in those needs.
One of the things that I always say, and the older I get, the more I see it in my own life and others, that out of everything bad that happens, something good eventually comes out of it. You may not see it right at the moment, but down the road, you'll go, oh, that happened because of this. Oh, wow. I believe that.
Yeah. It's very difficult to understand things. A child dies at a young age, and the parents are just devastated. How could that happen? Well, what would happen if that child had lived a few more years and something even worse had happened? You see, we don't know the end of the story, where the Lord has a much better understanding of why something happens when it does. Watched a movie yesterday, and was a guy, his son had died, I think he was 9 years old with cancer, which turned him into an atheist, okay? And he was fighting against God and, you know, all this, writing books, became the world's leading atheist, and then all of a sudden he has a near-death experience, turns his life around. But, you know, there are things that we don't know, and we can't understand why they're happening. That's why we're told to put it in the Lord's hands. And when we let Him have control, it's a whole lot easier. And that's kind of what's being looked at here, all right? Verses 5 through 10. The Lord used the forces of nature to punish mankind. All right? Just hold on to that premise for a moment. Look, before Him went pestilence and plague before Him went pestilence and plague followed at His heels. What did He do to Egypt? Plagues, pestilence. But all those things, what do the atheists try to do today? Oh, that was natural causes. You know, that stuff was because of that was a volcano that erupted and caused the Red Sea or the Nile River to run red, looked like blood, you know, and all this. They try to do natural causes. See? Well, it was blood, right? But what about the flies? What about the frogs? God used them, didn't He? All right? He stood, verse 6, and measured the earth. He looked and shook the nations. Well, talk about earthquakes, but what about shaking the nations? What shakes the nations? When was the last time the nations were shook? (1989), 1990, fall of the Berlin Wall, destruction of the Soviet Union. Nations were shook then, weren't they? Before that, 1945. How did that happen? How did that happen? Good prevailed over evil. We believe in both cases, right? Wasn't the greatest of good. There was still evil after that, wasn't there? The good prevailed over evil. Then the eternal mountains were scattered. The everlasting hills sank low. His were the everlasting ways. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction. This going back even to Egypt here. The curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. Was your wrath against the rivers, O Lord? Okay. Was the Lord angry against the rivers when He made the rivers flood? Or was His indignation against the sea when He made the seas roiled up and maybe caused hurricanes, typhoons and such? Was He mad at the sea? Was your anger, let's see, when you rode on your horses, on your chariot of salvation, say, all of that. Well, what was He doing? Well, again, the Lord uses forces of nature to punish what? Who? Mankind. Some examples that I have. Noah's flood, right? That destroyed the world as it was known at that time. But who was he mad at? Was he mad at the world? He was mad at this wrath was took out against man. The Egyptian plagues. Once again, he was mad at the Egyptians. I say mad. He was angry with them. The destruction of the Midianites and such, so that Israel could go into the promised land. Okay? That's a shaking of the nation there, right? Because that was something that set the tone for how many thousand years in the Middle East. Right there, that little piece of land where 3 continents come together. Think that wasn't important? Trade routes all coming through there? Sure it was. But you see how the Lord was working. And Habakkuk, a prophet, but understanding that the Lord's in control, he's understanding this. He's bringing that out. Okay, verses 5, that's verses 5 through 10. I missed 10, didn't I? The mountains saw you and writhed. Say, like earthquakes. The raging waters swept on, floods. The deep gave forth its voice. It lifted its hands on high, like overwhelming floods. So, look, verses 11 and 12. The Lord's omnipotence extends through the heavens, or omnipotence, but omnipotence. Omnipotent, that means all powerful. How powerful is it? Have we conquered outer space? We haven't even conquered inner space yet, right? But what about him? The sun and moon stood still in their place. At the light of your arrows they sped, at the flash of your glittering spear. How many times in the Old Testament before Habakkuk did the sun stand still? Twice. I say stand still, or at least do something funny, right? Twice. Once at the time of Moses in the wilderness, it stopped so Joshua could finish a battle. And second, we talked about that not too long ago with Hezekiah, with the sign, when it actually went backwards in the sky. It didn't go from east to west, it went from west to east. It went back so many degrees, or steps. Okay. Man can't do that. Can Mother Nature do that? How'd that happen? It tells us there's something. And then you go, you come on up into the life of Christ. When Christ was on the cross and the darkness came upon the face of the earth, it wasn't an eclipse because it lasted, 3 hours? And it wasn't just over that area of Jerusalem and Judah. It was over the face of the earth. That's what the writings, tell us. Not the Bible, but secular writing tells us. Wow.
That'd be kind of like God having to turn his back, link that to the darkness, turn his back on all the sin.
I think more so than that, it was just that the death of Christ on the cross is emblematic of complete darkness of mankind. They killed the light of the world. But what happens 3 days later? He's back. But again, his omnipotence, it's like that. Verses 3 through 15. The salvation of the Lord's people. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. Selah. Okay, what happened to the Egyptians? The army blocked the Red Sea, right? What happened to the armies who attacked them in the wilderness? Defeated. What happened to the nations in the Promised Land? Most of them defeated, except what? The ones that they refused to defeat. And they became a thorn in their flesh. Yep. But it was for the salvation of your anointed. Your anointed. Now, you can take that as to be kings and priests. I don't think you can take that to be the whole of Israel. You could take that to be the Christ. Because that was the purpose. That was the whole purpose of Israel, was to bring the Christ into the world. And we don't want to forget that. The purpose of Israel, the purpose of the promised land there, the purpose of the temple, the purpose of giving them the law, all of that was to bring the Christ into the world to do what? Save as many out of the world who would respond in faith. Crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me. Now you've got to change, because now it's a me. You see that? In verse 14? Who's me? Close. Closer.
What's your spirit?
No. It's the Messiah. It's the Lord. Okay. Start back at verse 13. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. Well, and now who's the anointed one? That's the Christ, the Messiah. And that's Jesus of Nazareth. Okay? You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck, who you pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me. Who did they come to scatter? Who did they come to destroy? Who did they come to stop? Who did they come to say, you're not going to rule over me? The Messiah, the Lord. Isn't that what the chief priests and elders were saying at the trial? This man will not rule over us. He claims to be the Son of God. He claims to be the king. What did Pilate ask him? Are you a king? It's as you say. Is that what he came here to be, a king? Not an earthly king, but the king of what? The faithful. God's people, the faithful. This man will not rule over us. We will destroy him. We'll have the Romans do it for us. Crucify him. Didn't work. Didn't work. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of the warriors who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You trampled the sea with your horses, the surging of the mighty waters. And again, that's the uprising of the nations, and that's emblematic of the Romans who finally come. The Romans are going to put an end to this, right? No. Who put an end to the Romans? The Messiah. The Christ. Yes. Because what did he do? Again, going back, they crucified Jesus. He rose on the third day. He established the church on Pentecost, which was 50 days after his death and burial, and after his resurrection, right? The church goes out into all the world. 40 years after that, Jerusalem is destroyed. Why are they destroyed? Because they persecuted the church, right? And they killed the Messiah. What happens in 325, AD 325? Well, go back. AD 312, Constantine makes Christianity a legal religion. AD 325, he makes it the religion of the Roman Empire. What then is not the religion of the Roman Empire?
Catholicism?
No, that comes a little bit later and is what is today. No, what was not then was the paganism. Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, all those gods that they worship, because that was their religion. You honor the gods. Which gods? All of them. And if you don't honor all of them, you are an atheist. They considered Christians atheists because they believed there was only one God. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but one God. What happened? Those religions are gone. And then what happens around 470, we'll say 475, 476, the Roman Empire falls. Yes, Catholicism, once Christianity became the state religion in 325, then it began to change and develop into the Roman Catholic Church, where they forced everybody to do what was controlled by the church in Rome. Tried to.
600 for them to get that put together.
Well, 606 is when they actually they promote someone to be Pope. And then go back and say, well, we actually had popes clear back to Peter. But no, that's the history of it. So, yeah. So what we have here, when the righteous turn to wickedness, what needs to happen? They need to be punished, don't they? What was going on in Judah at that time? Remember the history. Hezekiah was a good king. He had some reforms. He dies. Manasseh becomes the king. That's his son, and he's a bad king. Brings paganism back. Ammon, his son, continues the same thing. All right? Josiah becomes king, and he continues in that for 18 years to 622. Okay? And in 622, he starts reforms. And he turns things around. Then in 609, he gets killed. And Jehoahaz takes over. And the Egyptians take over. Because the Egyptians have killed Josiah in battle. All right? So, all these evil kings, Judah's going to be destroyed. Here, destruction comes back in. When those who are supposed to be righteous are doing evil, what has to be done? They have to be punished. And that's what the Lord is saying. And that's basically what's going on here. All right? So when the righteous turn to wickedness, they must be punished, but the righteous shall live by faithful adherence to the Lord's will. Whether they die or they continue to live. They have to go into exile. Okay? They're either going to live physically in exile or they will live eternally because they are righteous. But the anointed one must come as promised by the Lord. Well, where was that promised? Genesis chapter 3, Genesis chapter 12, the seed of Abraham. It's all through the Old Testament. Verse 16. Habakkuk says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. You think he's afraid? Didn't we talk about at the beginning? I hear what the Lord has said and I fear. Okay? Now look at the rest of verse 16. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. They're going to invade us. They're going to destroy our nation. They're going to destroy the temple, destroy Jerusalem. They're going to carry a bunch of people into exile. I'm afraid. I fear. My knees are knocking together. I'm so afraid. I'm shaking because it's war. It's a siege. But I'm going to quietly wait because the Lord's going to take care of them too. Because they're more evil than the people that are doing evil here. Is that faith? We can wait. We can hold on. We can get through whatever the Lord is going to bring on us in this time. And whether we live or whether we die, we know that we can get through it if we are righteous and we're living by faith. Will it be scary? Could be. Could be. Saw a little deal on the internet. If the nuclear bomb that destroyed Hiroshima went off at Pantex, what it would destroy. It would take out Pantex and probably Panhandle. But that's it. If a nuclear weapon that's on one of the Titan missiles that's been in our silos were to go off there, which, you know, that's what they take apart down there. If there was an accident there, Tampa would be spared. Amarillo would be gone. It's bigger than a tornado. Amarillo would be obliterated. It's tough to think about. Tampa would be spared. We're just out of that range. But you know what? The radiation would come this way.
Historically, Borger and Pantex would be struck at the same time because of the refining capacity along with the coast. Pantex and Borger were classified as one strike with multiple.
But what I'm saying is it wouldn't even have to be a strike. An accident. One technician with an accident could do that. It could be scary. You gotta be righteous. Okay. So now that just leaves us with this last little section here. We'll get it done today. Verses 16, or verses 17 through 19. I got 17, but I have it separated. Let me check it. Yeah, I don't have it separated.
Yes.
I've got it at the bottom, but I don't have on down through 19 listed here on my deal. So it kind of all goes together. All right. Habakkuk rejoices in the Lord. So after this song or poem that he writes, he says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor the fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. What does that sound like? Famine. Famine. No food. No food. In other words, the nation is going to be destroyed. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. Verse 18, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. Salvation is not just getting through the problems of this life. Salvation is about eternal life. There's so many people. I go to church. Yeah, knew a guy. The reason I go to church is I know what side, I know what, I know where my bread is buttered. Because he thought that by going to church it was like a good luck charm. That he'd have a good job and things would go well, and he's like, well, it hasn't. It hasn't. He's made a mess of his life. Oh, he's had good positions and stuff and what have you because he's a you know kind of people like that. But morally, ethically, I wouldn't trust him with $1. No way. But he knows who butters his bread. 19. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. On my high places. Are we walking on a higher plane? Do we live life on a higher level than just the things of this world? If the United States is destroyed tomorrow and we survive, are we going to be okay? It'll be tough, but will we be okay? We will if we trust in Him. But if we're like a dollar bill and we say the dollar bill is why we trust in the Lord, then we're going to have a lot of trouble. And it ends with, to the choir master with stringed instruments, and I don't know if that was what Habakkuk wrote or whether that was something that was added later on. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, let's sit back. Very, very deep understanding that this world is not all of our concern. The righteous will live by faith, regardless of what happens here. And whether it's good or whether it's evil, you know what? This too shall pass. All right. Do you have any questions or comments?
It's good.
When we go to Nahum, Lord willing, next week, now we're going to talk about the enemy being destroyed. That's a lot better. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your time and for your